can you tell me, in your opinion, that the impact of litvaks in Jewish culture and science, just in general?
The litvaks are a community that well known for their study, for their knowledge and their studies, and certainly was a community that provided later on, maybe not so much when they were living here, but the ones who have moved, especially to Western Europe and the United States, South Africa, Israel, many of them have been involved in a whole range of activities in the sciences. Obviously here we have a whole series of people in literature, but in the sciences especially, we have a whole number of people from Kruk to, of course, we're involved with the discovery of DNA, through a whole series of other ones which you've caught me on one leg, so I've got to think of names, but I can't think of any at the moment. But of course there are many of them who are involved in all sorts of scientific activities in many of the most prestigious institutions all around the world. So you have litvaks and in fact descendants in many of these places, and I think the main reason is not necessarily that they are not particularly necessarily more gifted than anybody else, but I think the main thing is a culture of learning, which is it's a culture of learning which comes already from the Litvak tradition, which starts already here in Lithuania in religious studies, and then continues over into secular studies when people become more modernized and more enlightened. So that's part of Litvak culture, which is definitely carried over from the religious and right into the secular.
Okay, that's cool. Can you name a few objects that you explored with Litvak culture?
Well, obviously,
except for this one.
Well, obviously, the most important one I've been exploring is this one. So this is the Great Synagogue of Lithuania, which is the most important Litvak monument there is. There is no other that is more important than this. So I can't not mention this one. I'm working at the moment also on trying to discover the place of the synagogues in Shaduva, which we're doing with geophysical machinery. Which so far last year we located them already. So these are the main issues I've been working on over here, and of course we did some work some years ago also in Punare. So these are the main subjects I personally have been working on, but of course there are many other studies on many places within Lithuania where every small town almost has some sort of Jewish past to it. So small town or big town. Okay. So that's something, of course, which is studied about Litvak culture all over the place.
You're a member of Israel Antiquities Authority, right?
That's correct,
How much of interest is the Litvak culture for the authority?
It's not a matter necessarily specifically Litvak culture. We're talking about Jewish culture. Certainly, Jewish culture for Israelis is seen as part of their heritage. We see it as something which is we could say a shared heritage. It's a heritage which is shared with Jews who come from many countries around the world and now live in Israel, with the countries of their origin. So in the case of Lithuania, we see this culture as being a shared heritage of the Lithuanians who live here, and of course many Jews who now do not live here, and this is part of their ancestry. So that's something which we see of great importance. We see that we have with the responsibility to look after these places rests with the countries where the heritage exists. So that rests with Lithuania, but there is certainly something which we can contribute in awareness and in knowledge, which can help preserve this culture, not only for Litvaks, but also for people the Lithuanians who live here. So it's a mutual and shared interest that we think we can give a hand in that aspect.
You've been exploring the Great Synagogue, but you also found some artifacts from the surrounding area, right? So what can you tell about this Jewish quarter?
Yeah, well, we never consider the Great Synagogue in isolation. The Great Synagogue is part of what's called the Schulhof, and the Schulhof I always compare it to a community center. Okay. At the very center is the Great Synagogue. But beyond that, we have other features: the smaller synagogues, bathhouses, the mikvaot, the places where people ritually bathe themselves, a small prison for people who had been not behaving well, water features like fountains. So all these things were inside the within the space of the Schulhof. So this was the center of Jewish life. Even there was a shop. There were shops here selling meat. There was a most famous library of rabbinic literature was here within the Schulhof. So all these aspects are within this very, very small space for almost 300 years within the city, right up until the Second World War. So it is a very important focus within the Jewish quarter, the central focus of the Jewish quarter. And of course around that there were many other associated synagogues, cultural institutions, people's houses, everything mixed up in one complex.
Okay. Can you please tell me about a little bit of your background? How are you connected with Lithuania?
Yeah, my background is litvak on every side possible. My family comes from various what we call shtetl, which are small towns within Lithuania, from the very extreme west all the way to the very extreme east. So I have one grandmother who comes from Kretinge. I have one grandfather who comes from Shaduva. I have another grandmother who comes in from a town which is just on the other side of the Latvian border today. It's called Kraslava. It's just near Daugavpils. But this is part of what we call historical Lithuania, which is all included within that culture. And one other one is comes from a town called Vaslav, which was part of the gubernia of Vilnius, and today in Belarus. So all these are all Litvak towns, even though some of them are today in Latvia or Belarus. They are still considered within the Lithuanian Jewish sphere.
Yeah, I understand. In my book, I have a very special chapter dedicated to the tunnels of Jerusalem.
Okay.
What are your opinions about what can you say about those tunnels? How important are they?
Well, first of all, as somebody who was responsible for some of the tunnels, it goes beyond what my opinion is of it. So because I was involved with the decision making for some of these tunnels. What is known as the Western Wall Tunnel, which is the tunnel which goes all the way from the Western Wall all the way through to the Via Dolorosa on the other side, a total of 500 meters, is today one of the most spectacular archaeological sites in Jerusalem. I think nobody can go through that and not feel that. So you have a number of sections there which show parts of the Western Wall. They show parts of the Mamluk architecture above it. Today there is a section which even shows a small theatre within it, a small Roman theatre underneath inside the tunnels. So it's one of the most important sites for the understanding of Second Temple archaeology in the city of Jerusalem. The fact that the Temple Mount is not explorable because of the business of the mosques means that we have to rely on proxy data, in other words, data which comes from outside the site to give us information about how the site actually existed. So that's what's so important.
What can you say about that Rabbi Getz story?
Which one?
Which one? The digging into the Arab.
Oh yeah, one other thing. Well, Getz, who was the chief rabbi of the Western Wall in, I can't remember the year, it's 1982 or something like that.
Yeah.
Decided to.
I know the story, but I mean.
Decided to do that. It was reckless and dangerous. It's bordering on. It's reckless and dangerous. He was stopped, of course, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. Okay. He said he believed that he can find the way to find the Holy of the Holies.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what he said.
Okay.
That's what he said. Look, Jerusalem is a place of sensitivity, and we have to walk a tightrope all the time between being able to live in the city, on the other hand, to make sure that the sensitivity does not break out to what it does break out somewhere, which is violence. So walking that very, very narrow line is an art, and what he did is went over the line. So maybe it is the way to the Holy of Holies, but if it's the Holy of Holies, then the Holy of Holies will wait.
Okay.
In the meantime, we have to make sure that we have a city which can be lived in, and as best as possible. with all the populations that live in the city. So that includes the Jewish population, that includes the Muslim population, the Palestinian population, and that's the reason that he was stopped, and that's the reason that the Holy of Holies will wait for the Messiah.